On this week's episode, I'm joined by Liz Sharma. Liz is originally from the UK, but has lived in Portugal for more than 5 years and is the founder and CEO of Talk the Streets, an amazing YouTube channel and online resource where you can learn to speak Portuguese like a real Portuguese local. We discuss, amongst other things, how Liz's life has changed since moving to Portugal, some of the ins and outs of the Portuguese language, and why Portugal will always be Liz's first love. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. And I'm really happy to be joined here by Liz Sharma. Liz, thank you for being on the podcast, and how are you?
I'm great, thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
You're very welcome. Liz, for anybody that's been searching on YouTube for anything to do with Portugal, you are probably no stranger to them, but just give us a little bit of information and a short introduction about you.
Yeah, so I'm English, but I actually have been living in Portugal for the last nearly 5 years, and I teach Portuguese. So I have a YouTube channel, and I'm obsessed with helping people build their confidence and conversation skills in Portuguese, specifically Portuguese from Portugal. So when I started, there wasn't really much content, especially on YouTube, for people who were searching for how to speak Portuguese. Of course, the biggest market is for people learning Brazilian Portuguese. And as we know, there are some differences. So I decided to kind of step into that void because it's something that I'm very familiar with. I absolutely love Portugal. I love living here, and I've studied Portuguese for a very long time. So yeah, I just wanted to help other people because when I was learning myself, I also struggled, where's all the fun, exciting, engaging content that we can learn from online? So yeah, I just decided to create it myself.
Incredible. Okay, yeah, you started off wanting to help people, but it's exploded into this massive YouTube channel, and we're going to get into that because I'm a fan, and that's how we got in touch. So, but we're going to get into all of that, the name and everything. But maybe you can just start off. I mean, you one of the things that comes across in your YouTube videos is your passion for Portugal. Mm-hmm. I agree with you about the Portuguese or European Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese. I really battle with Brazilian Portuguese. I have to ask my wife, she's Portuguese, and I have to say to her, what did the guy just say? Because there's sometimes that I really can't pick it up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, European Portuguese is very, very different. Like I said, one of the things that I enjoy about your channel is your passion and your enjoyment of Portugal comes out in your YouTube channel and your videos. But tell us, I mean, how did that all happen? Because you got a British and I think Indian background.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how did that happen with Portugal? How did that all start?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was born and grew up in the UK, and I loved languages from a young age. So I started Spanish at school, like lots of people do. And then when it came to time to go to university, I thought, yeah, I'm going to stick to Spanish. I love it. I'd been on a school trip to Spain, and I was like, this is my thing. I love talking to people. I love learning languages. I love traveling, and I love sunny places. So this seems like it's going to tick all the boxes. And then, yeah, lots of universities were offering the opportunity to pick up Portuguese from scratch and actually do a double honours in Spanish and Portuguese. So I thought, yeah, let's give that a go. I love a challenge. And then as soon as I started learning Portuguese, I just fell in love with it because I don't know, perhaps partly because I like to be a little bit different and it felt a little bit more kind of niche, but it was just such a beautiful language. And when I actually got into it, again, I'm one of those people that when I see something that doesn't exist, I'm like, well, I must create it then. So my university didn't have like a Portuguese society. The Spanish society was huge. They had events, they had trips, they had bar crawls, all of the typical student stuff. But there was nothing for Portuguese. So I decided to set up a Portuguese society at university. So since 2005, I've been trying to, share my passion for Portugal. So through that, I went on my first trip to Portugal. I organised a trip for the other students. We came to Porto, and visited the port cellars and strolling along the river. And I was like, yeah, I think Portugal is a pretty special place, and I should spend more time here. So it went from there, really.
Okay, so you started doing it before it was fashionable.
Exactly, way before it was cool. You should have seen Porto in 2006. It was completely different to the way it is today.
It's true.
But super, super charming. And then, of course, when you study languages, you have to spend a year abroad.
Okay.
And I'm not going to lie, I was supposed to go to Brazil. I was also super interested in Brazil and excited about, the idea of hanging out in João Pessoa on the beach, which is where my university had a partnership. But unfortunately, I was ill and I couldn't go. I missed the start dates and my friends went without me, and it was very heartbreaking. But that's how I ended up in Coimbra. And really, it's kind of like one of those things, a blessing in disguise, because I probably wouldn't be living the life I'm living now if I hadn't have had that experience of coming to Coimbra and really living here, for 6 months to do a semester and just really, really falling in love with Portugal. And I always thought, you know what, when I grow up, maybe I'll come back and live here. And that's what I ended up doing.
Okay, amazing. What were some of those things in those first visits to Portugal that grabbed you?
I think the history, the character, the charm, winding cobbled streets, people, having a chat to each other on the streets, just things like coming from a busy, bustling city like London, we've kind of lost that ability to, operate in a small community where everybody knows each other and wants to have a chat. And that was just something that I found super, super welcoming, and just almost instantly felt at home. So I think that kind of really welcoming atmosphere was certainly exactly what I needed at the time. And of course, being in a place like Coimbra, it's so steeped in tradition and history. It's one of the oldest universities in Europe. So there is so much to kind of learn there. And there's this almost mystical, magical charm about the place, with the students' fado and all of the traditions to do with the university. They literally walk around in capes. So it was just all so different. Coming from, of course, London has incredible, history and culture as well. But this just seemed so different because it was so connected to a sort of a really more old-fashioned way of living that I just thought was just lovely. Really spoke to me.
Yeah, and you actually speak to people on the train and speak to people when you walk into a cafe. Whereas London, you don't do anything like that at all.
Yeah, you can't just walk in and ask for something somewhere. People will be upset if you don't start with a bon dia or a boa tarde and a tudo bem, and have a little how are you exchange. It's very different to people queuing up in Starbucks and just barking their order and walking off. There really is this culture of having a chat, which I love.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one of my first visits to London after living in Portugal for a while and trying to have a conversation with a guy on the tube. And he looked at me like I was a crazy person. He didn't want to talk.
Yeah, you literally need to avoid eye contact, which is a shame. But it's just a different way of life. We have different things that I love about London, but yeah, in terms of Portugal, and of course the sunshine helped as well.
Definitely. We have some crossover. It's with our online world. You've been on the People of Lisbon show, and they've been on the podcast. So I'm really happy that you're here. But so we know that you live in Lisbon. Why Lisbon? And also maybe just sort of at what point and what made you decide? Okay, I want to do this permanently. I want to make Portugal and Lisbon my home.
Yeah, so I've been working in London for 5 years. I was a PR consultant. I was living the hustle and bustle life, living in East London, cycling to work and living that kind of lifestyle. And honestly, it was really down to the fact that I was turning 30, and everybody has that moment where they take a look around at their life and think, okay, is this what I want to be doing for the next 20 years? What is there another adventure that I should be thinking about? And yeah, I really was in a place where I hadn't quite felt like I found where I fitted in and where I felt like I was completely myself. So I decided it was time to try something new and go on a new adventure. So when I thought, okay, I'm going to move abroad, where would I go? And Portugal was obviously at the top of the list because I'd already had so many special experiences there. I spoke the language, so it just made sense. And a friend of mine, I'd never heard of the phrase digital nomad, but a friend of mine was going to try it out. She was an illustrator and she went to 6 different cities over 6 months, and one of them was going to be Lisbon. And she said, well, listen, why don't you come along? I'm going to be there for a month. We'll hang out in Lisbon and see what you think of it. So that's what I did. It was kind of like a chance to dip my toe in to another city, because at the same time I did feel sad about leaving London, because, you know, it's where I grew up. I always call it the first love of my life. But I, you know, knew I needed a change. So I think being from London, I thought, I couldn't possibly be happy anywhere else. I won't have this, and this, because we have so much great stuff. But actually, when I came to Lisbon and I saw, you know, how vibrant it was, and how many exciting things were going on, and things were certainly starting to move and shake around 2015. It was still under the radar, but it was certainly a place that people were starting to come to. As a place that was, you know, just had this incredible quality of life. So yeah, I came for 3 weeks. I absolutely loved it. And from then on, I was like, right, I need to work out how I'm going to move there permanently, which I eventually did 2 years later.
Brilliant. I mean, what sets it apart? I mean, you know, you talk about this, the hustle, but you can't cycle to work in Lisbon. That's for sure.
But you can walk. So it's
not in high heels, not on those calcida stones.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it just felt like a place where people had different priorities, and I think you know what I mean. You called your podcast "The Simple Life," and I just feel like people have their priorities right here. What people care about is, you know, having Sunday lunch with the family, or taking time to go to the beach, or taking time to, you know, have a glass of wine with your lunch. And, you know, there's just so much more space for that here because it's so embedded in the culture. Whereas in London, I was certainly falling into a trap of, you know, let's work 24/7 and cram ourselves onto the tube and keep ourselves so busy that we don't notice that we're really tired. And yeah, especially when you can be here, you know, on my lunch break, I can sit in the garden and I can, you know, get some nice sun and relax rather than, you know, stuffing myself into a pret-a-manger.
Well, you brought it up now. I think this is maybe I'm not counting, but I think the third time you've spoken about the sunshine. It's a massive factor for Londoners to actually be able to see the sun. It's a rare thing in London.
Yeah, and I think you don't realize how much you need it until you live somewhere where you have it. And it's funny, I still love seasons. I love to see the seasons change. And right now it's well over 25 degrees here in the middle of October, and I'm waiting for autumn. I want to put on my cardigan and some socks. But really, when you're...
Portuguese will kill you if they hear you saying that. They'll be like, no, don't wish that upon us.
But yeah, I mean, like I say, living in London, you do just get accustomed to not seeing the sun and grey skies and rain. So when you're here and you don't have to think about what's the weather going to do tomorrow, it is most likely going to be a blue sky. At the most, there might be a quick shower, but yeah, it's just a completely different. It really lifts your mood to be able to be in the sunshine, and of course it's very healthy for you. But I always laugh when it rains here and people are like, oh, I'm not going to go out, or, you know, there's gridlock traffic everywhere, and sorry I'm late, it was raining. And you just think, if people said that in England, I wouldn't ever go anywhere. So yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, I've been in Lisbon where like a downpour started, and you could swear it's acid rain that people are running the way people run for cover. And then you go into a place like Dublin or London and it starts raining and nobody even moves, you know, it just carries on. So it's hilarious. I remember going to London a couple of times in February when it's like really cold, and you can always see the people who aren't from there, the ones that look like they're crying because their eyes are watering because of the cold. I was one of them. So it's hilarious. Liz, let's talk about let's talk about Talk the Streets. A great name. How did the name come about, first of all?
So yeah, I have my friend Helen to thank for that. It's basically I wanted to teach Portuguese in a way that was very accessible and very applicable to real life. So one of the things I've always felt about language learning is there's this kind of disconnect between what you learn in the classroom and the way people actually speak in real life. And particularly if you're walking down the streets of Lisbon and you're overhearing these conversations in cafes or on the street, it's not going to be the kind of Portuguese that you are taught in a classroom. So I thought this would be a really cool idea for my YouTube channel, but also a kind of philosophy behind the way that I teach and approach the language. So rather than walking the streets, you're going to learn to talk the streets and actually not only understand the way that people speak in real life, but be able to communicate in a way that is more natural, rather than sounding like a robot that you've copied from the app that you're using to learn.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I was hoping. That was kind of what the name, why you called it that, because that was my experience with learning Portuguese. When I came to Portugal, I couldn't speak a word. And I went for lessons first, and you learn all the grammar and everything. And then you realize what I'm learning is not what people are talking. And something that I tell, because I've got clients from all over the world, and something that I tell them is you need to hear it and read it at the same time. Because that's sort of the only way, because the way that it reads and the way that it's spoken can be very, very different. And that's really, yeah. So that's been my experience. So it makes sense.
Yeah. And actually my most successful videos have been how to understand fast Portuguese, because this is a thing that people tell me time and time again. They see something written down and they think, okay, this is basically Spanish. I can follow this. And then they hear it said and they think, well, that's nothing like what I thought it was going to sound like based on what it looked like written down, because the Portuguese will swallow a lot of the sounds because of the rhythm of the language. It's a stress timed language, so you kind of have this feeling that so many of the words and sounds have been dropped off, and therefore for a beginner, somebody who's new to learning the language, it's very hard to detect those sounds that are missing. So if you understand that, and you understand how when something's written down, this is how it's likely to sound when it's spoken, it's a huge step. That's always a big light bulb moment for people.
It's massive, yeah.
When they work that out.
Yeah, it's massive. It's huge. I mean, what are some of the future sort of lessons and things that you're working on? I don't want you to give too much away because people need to tune in and watch.
Sure.
But what have you got planned coming up?
Well, it's amazing because essentially I can never run out of topics because there is just so much to cover. So, like I say, people tend to like these videos where I'm kind of deciphering the way to listen and to speak, but also I do a lot of practical situations. So I will go along to a restaurant or a coffee shop or the hairdressers or the dentist, and we actually, workshop that situation. We look at the vocabulary that you do, that you need, and speak to this kind of expert and talk about what you're kind of going to know. So yeah, in terms of what's coming up, I'm about to film one as to why Portuguese is harder to learn than Spanish. I'm also working on some stuff around, I always do lots of stuff around the differences between Brazilian and European Portuguese, which people always find really interesting. But I also want to do some stuff about other regions that speak Portuguese and other countries that speak Portuguese, because as we know, there are several countries, not just Portugal and Brazil, who speak Portuguese, and I want to also broaden people's knowledge of that stuff. So we did an episode on Angolan Portuguese, which was super fun. And so yeah, just again, just bringing it to people's attention that there are all these different variations, and there's just so much to learn and admire about all these different cultures. So that's what I really hope to do with the channel as well, just kind of raise the visibility of Portuguese speakers, not just people from Portugal, but globally as well.
Yeah. This episode that we're recording now together will more than likely come out after your Spanish versus Portuguese episode. But why is Portuguese more difficult to learn than Spanish? Is it the sound? Is it what is it?
So I've boiled it down to, again, this is just my personal opinion as somebody who has learned both languages, but I've boiled it down to 4 factors. One is the pronunciation, because Spanish is a lot more say what you see. Portuguese has a lot more rules in terms of what you need to do with certain letters, depending on where they are in a sentence. We have the nasal sounds, which people aren't used to. So that's one thing. The other thing is something that I touched on just a moment ago. Portuguese is a stress-timed language and Spanish is a syllable-timed language. The reason why syllable-timed languages are easier to listen to is because all the syllables are enunciated. Okay, so when you think about somebody speaking Spanish or Italian, it's quite staccato. It's ba 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 ba, right? Whereas when we speak English or Portuguese, they're stress-timed languages. So the stress only goes on certain parts of the sentence, and everything else gets swallowed up and disappears. So
depending on that little line, wherever that little line is on the.
Exactly.
I've learned that the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Another reason is exposure. There are simply a lot more people who speak Spanish, and therefore multimedia content, which is what people always turn to help with their language learning. So something like, movies, TV shows, Netflix, Spanish speaking countries just have a lot more to export. In that sense, also because the Portuguese, as we know, they watch a lot of English language TV that then has subtitles. They don't dub, whereas the Spanish and the Brazilian will dub, and then that's why the Portuguese actually have great English.
Interesting.
There was one more reason, but I can't remember what it is now. So
I love that you've come sort of from that you've come from a non-Portuguese background and learned the language. And I mean, your Portuguese is amazing. You're fluent. You sound you don't even have an accent. I get told that when I speak Portuguese, I sound Ukrainian.
Really?
I'm not Ukrainian, but that's what happens. But you don't even have an accent, so I love that. And I also love, one of the things I love about your channel is that you speak to, you get your Fado singer on there and the wine guys and things like that. And I think that's how I learned. Not with a camera, but that's how I learned. I just went and sat in a pub, or I sat in a cafe, and I made mistakes, and it was the best way to learn. But I mean, what have you learned about Portugal as a result of doing this channel? What are the things you've discovered?
That's a really great question. I mean, I think because it's been kind of over 15 years now that I've been kind of studying Portuguese and very kind of linked to Portuguese culture. So there's so much that I love about it and so much more that I want to know. But I think for me, more than what I've learned about Portugal, I've learned so much more about Portuguese because, like you said, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a non-native speaker. So when I come up against, when I'm teaching and people ask me questions and I have to stop and think and go, that's a great question. Let me work out why you're having this difficulty. Because everybody transposes rules and ideas from their own language into the language that they're learning. So actually what I have found so interesting is being this kind of bridge for people between native English speakers and native Portuguese speakers, and trying to work out where these difficulties are and why people are getting confused and stuck, and actually coming up with ways of explaining things, coming up with strategies to overcome very common problems. Because at the end of the day, I love learning as well. I'm an eternal student. My Portuguese is good, but it isn't perfect. I'm still learning, every day. And that's what I think I enjoy most. Like I say to my students, you have to be curious. And I try and stay super curious as well all the time. So when I'm having a discussion with somebody, or I hear a word I don't understand or something, like I will always make sure that I ask so that I can learn, but also then pass that on to my students. One
of the things that I've always sort of told my clients and and maybe this is something that you can sort of confirm or not. You're welcome to disagree with me. But one of the things that I've told people is it is a difficult language to learn, but it's a great place to learn because people are just so open and patient and almost too polite to correct you. What has your experience been there with that? I mean, it's not a place where you need to learn Portuguese because people speak so many languages. But what has been your experience with as a place and a people to learn this language from?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you know, I do find people so welcoming and friendly. I think my students come across a few problems which you just touched on there. The first is you don't actually need to speak it. If you are in a city, right? I have lots of people who I work with who are living in more remote areas, and of course their neighbours are going to be, you know, perhaps they're older and they don't speak as much English. So somewhere like that, you're going to progress a lot quicker because the number one key for learning a language is if you don't use it, you lose it. So practicing it day in, day out is the one thing. There's nothing else. The one thing that is going to improve your language is continually practicing it. And sometimes you can get away with not doing that here, which is a big challenge. The other challenge is that when people see you struggling, they'll switch to English because they don't know that you're on this journey of trying to learn and that you want to practice, right? So they think they're being helpful by actually kind of rescuing you when you're struggling. So that's another challenge that people come across. But really, I found that if you just say to somebody, I'd like to practice, please help. People will be very patient and kind, and that's lovely. And I always say to my students, Portugal should be your classroom. I'm super anti traditional classroom textbooks, all of those things, because even when people come to me and say, well, what level is this going to get me to? Which exam can I pass? And I say, that's not why I created this course. I didn't create this so that you could, call yourself an A2 speaker, because what does that mean at the end of the day? Really, the outcome should be that you can survive in a conversation with a native speaker. You can navigate your everyday life with joy and ease, and just really live Portugal at its best by speaking the language and actually being able to go that level deeper with people, rather than sort of skating around on the surface and feeling like a tourist.
Yeah, I love the concept of not doing this in a classroom. I think that's because I learned very little sitting in a classroom 3 nights a week at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And where I learned was speaking to people and making mistakes, and often not getting corrected. I mean, even my family, my daughter the other day, she says to me, she's 9, she says, Dad, you know that you say that one, I always used to say Dev said, and she said, Dad, it's Dev this said. Okay. And she corrected me, and I'm like, only now you're correcting me, only now, thank you. And my wife as well, the other day she said something that I always say this one word, I can't remember what it was, and I thought, you know what, all these years you've been letting me say it wrong. It's not okay, so yeah, I mean.
So you say that you're happy to make mistakes because that's the number one thing that holds people back, because learning as adults, we have all of this, our brains are wired against us wanting to learn new things because we don't want to make a fool of ourselves. At the end of the day, we have all of this chemistry in our brain saying, don't make yourself look like a fool. And so it's really, really hard to overcome that. And I think that that's another big mistake that people will make. They think, well, I'm not going to do it because it's definitely not perfect. And I just say, progress over perfection, because if you try and strive for perfection, you're never going to open your mouth. And it's only by speaking, making mistakes and being corrected, because actually when we do get corrected, you just mentioned there 2 examples, you're never going to forget those things now because it's burned on your brain of like, oh, I got that wrong, and that's actually the best and the fastest way to build new neural pathways in your brain and actually retain new information.
That was deep. That was very scientific. Now you're getting into neural pathways and things. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. That's too heavy for a Wednesday. How for you, from Liz, who first arrived to we're talking 2005, I think you mentioned, coming to Portugal, and Liz today, how has knowing the language to the level that you know it now helped you enjoy the country more, because I found for me, I never struggled to enjoy the country before. It wasn't a case of I hated the country because I couldn't speak the language. Completely the opposite. But I found that my relationship with the country has evolved because of my language.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a people person. So, and I always say that the soul of a city is the people who live there, right? Otherwise it would just be empty. So really, to fully enjoy the place you're living, you need to have connections with the other people who are in it. And just yesterday, actually, I was in a taxi on the way home, and I was just having a chat with the driver. He was actually Brazilian, and the things that we were talking about were a level deeper than what we would have been talking about if we were speaking in English, right? We were sharing experiences of living in both Brazil and Portugal, and discussing, how we feel about living here and things like that. And he said some super interesting things, and I just thought we would never have had this conversation if we hadn't started chatting away in Portuguese. And I think for me, that's what it is. And when people come to me to learn, this is what they say. They say, I know I don't have to learn, but I just feel like it's going to help me be more respectful in this kind of adopted country. And also, I do want to make connections with local people. I don't want to be that person who stays in an expat bubble and just cuts themselves off from real life here, and to being able to contribute and be part of it rather than an observer, I guess.
Yeah. I think you need to get my son on your podcast. He's 3, and he speaks English to me, and he speaks Portuguese to his mom.
Adorable.
And switches just randomly, and so much so that the other day he came home from school. He just started big sort of the next phase of school, pre-primary. And I've been trying to get him, he wasn't that keen, and he was a little bit grumpy also after holidays. And I was trying to get him enthusiastic about school. And I was asking him, what's your teacher's name? And he kept saying to me, it's Pink. And I was like, what's Pink, Benji? What's Pink? And he's going, it's Pink, Dada, it's Pink. And eventually I said to my wife, what is he talking about, this pink thing? And she stopped dead, and she went, the teacher's name is Rosa. And he's been translating the name of the teacher because for his dad that doesn't speak Portuguese. So funny.
Oh God, that's so cute. Yeah, it's fascinating how children can do that.
Incredible. I still have some lost in translation moments with my wife, with my work colleagues. Have you got any that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a long time that I've been learning. It's been a long time since I've really put my foot in it. But one time does stand out of when I was living in Lagos, actually, and it was actually my friend who was in the video about wine tasting. And it was his birthday, and I mixed up the 2 words because it's all in the pronunciation. Open and closed vowels are very important to understand. I mixed up the word coco for the word coco, which is coconut and poop. So I asked him, okay, so I thought that, coconut flavor was his favorite. Is this what you would like for your birthday cake? And it's very easy to get things like that mixed up, especially in the beginning, and especially if you're not clear on your pronunciation. I remember another friend as well, when she was, I ended up living with her when I came to Coimbra, and when she went to view the apartment, she said to the landlady that she really, really wanted to morrer aqui rather than morar aqui. So the 2 verbs, morrer meaning to die and morar meaning to live. She obviously wanted to say that she really wanted to live there rather than die there. That would be a bit extreme.
Well, it's still a good thing, if you want to die in a place, you also really, really like it. So it could work.
So yeah, it's very, very easily done.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say? You've mentioned some of the things, especially the sounds of the parts of the words. What are some of the other things that you would, just in a nutshell, recommend to people, or that you would advise people to keep in mind when they're learning this language, learning Portuguese?
So, I mean, I actually recently did a video called 7 Deadly Mistakes That Beginners Make. And we actually talked about this in detail because I've seen time and time again people getting certain things wrong. So first of all, if your plan is to come to Portugal, make sure you learn with content that is European Portuguese. So, of course, when you're a beginner, you're not necessarily going to know the difference, but look out whether it's a Brazilian or a Portuguese flag on the material that you're using. So Duolingo, for example, only focuses on Brazilian Portuguese, whereas an app like Memrise, for example, does have a European Portuguese option because the pronunciation in particular is going to be so different. So my first piece of advice is, especially when you're starting to listen to the language for the first time, it really needs to be European Portuguese. Then I would say focus on 3 things. I say pronunciation, focus on learning how to make the sounds, because once you've got that, you'll be able to hear better as well. Focus on frequency words. So frequent words you're going to need to use day in, day out. And again, sometimes this is where people fall down if they're using apps to learn, because they will teach you random stuff you're never going to need to know. You're not going to need to know all of the animals in the zoo, but you are going to need to know, the bus and the items of clothing, things that are actually going to be useful. And then finally, really try and make it practical, like I just mentioned. So learning the kind of things that you're going to be wanting to do on a day-to-day basis, like ordering a coffee and chatting to your neighbor and things like that. So that's what I really try and provide, all of that content on my channel, stuff that people are going to be able to use day in, day out.
Brilliant. Okay. Favorite Portuguese expressions? I like estás feito ao bife. I love it. I use it a lot. I use it sometimes and people don't know what I mean, but it's a good one.
I'm very close to my neighbor who lives downstairs, and she is so typically Portuguese, and she's always yelling. We can always hear her from upstairs, and something that she will always yell is Deus me livre, meaning like, oh no, God save me from that, like it's not something that I want to do, thank you. So yeah, whenever I'm speaking in English and I'm just joking, I'm gonna Deus me livre, like no thank you. So she makes me laugh a lot. So yeah, just funny expressions that people come out with. Another one my neighbors always say is now inventes, like stop making things up, like when they're like, oh, you're talking rubbish.
I've heard that one at home.
Yes.
One that I heard yesterday at home, I can't remember now exactly in Portuguese, but it translated to I'm in the sauce of the broccoli, or I'm in the water of the broccoli. I'd never heard it before, and apparently it's one that's used. I love peixe não puxa carucha.
I've not heard that one before. What does that
mean? Fish doesn't pull the carriage, meaning you shouldn't eat fish because it doesn't give you strength, or something along those lines. It was an interesting one as well. I've heard that a few times around work.
I've done a video as well on idiomatic expressions where me and a friend, we're reading these out, and the other one has to guess what they mean, because sometimes it's not obvious at all. But
a lot revolved around food. A lot of them revolved around food.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like muito chama-se virar frango. Like if it's not your first time doing something, it's like, I've been turning chickens for a long time. Don't worry about it.
I've heard that one as well, actually. Yeah, I've heard that one as well. I wore a jacket. Okay, so I'm ready for school. And I'm going to put my reputation on the line.
Ooh.
And I'm going to let you test me a little bit, more for my own curiosity, because I've been here for a while and I should know. So, do you want to?
Yeah, vamos
test
falar
the waters. Vamos falar.
Certo. Então, como estás hoje?
Estou tudo bem. Estou a fazer uma entrevista muito fixe para o podcast e estou bem. Está calor.
Pois, aqui também. Mas onde é que tu estás? Eu não sei exatamente onde é que tu moras.
Agora, eu moro em Óbidos. É 1 hora norte de Lisboa, perto de um castelo. Conheces Óbidos?
Óbidos.
Óbidos.
Ginginha.
Exact.
Ah, muito bem. Sim, conheço. Eu fui várias vezes. Sim, é muito fixe. Também muito histórico.
Tá.
Mas também quero saber porquê é que tu gostas de viver em Portugal?
Muitas coisas. Segurança, pessoas boas, boa comida, bom vinho
Que
e
tipo
uma
de gostas? Que tipo de vinho gostas?
tinto de Alentejo.
Também é, mas do Douro. Eu gosto mais do vinho do Douro. Muito bem, tu falas bué de bem, pá.
Obrigado. I got told by a lady on the plane, a random lady on the plane the other day. I was flying to Belgium, and she was speaking Portuguese to the lady next to me and saying, I don't think he speaks Portuguese. And then I spoke to them in Portuguese, and she was just like, oh, you speak Portuguese better than some Portuguese people, which was funny. It was funny.
Yeah. Actually, I get that the other way around. People just assume that I'm Brazilian or Portuguese, and then when I speak English, I actually get that as a comment a lot on YouTube. They're like, but why are you using a British accent? Or like, why is your English so good? And I'm like,
yeah, it's phenomenal. It's because you could pass for Portuguese. You could. I don't. So people straight away think I'm not Portuguese when they see me.
Actually, when I speak European Portuguese, you can definitely tell that I'm not native. But when I lived in Brazil and I spoke Brazilian Portuguese, coupled with the way I look, because Brazil is so big, even if I didn't sound like I was exactly from the region where I was, people would assume I was just from somewhere else. That was actually really liberating, to live somewhere where people just took you for a local and you didn't have to answer lots of questions all the time about why do you speak Portuguese and why is it so good. I have that conversation a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Liz, I mean, yeah, that's one of the strangest questions I get from Portuguese people is, why would you leave South Africa and come to Portugal? And I'm like, isn't it obvious? Isn't it so obvious? But anyway, you mentioned how Lisbon sort of had that, it still had that vibe and lots of things going on like London, but different priorities and a different pace and a balance. 5 years now in Portugal, how has Portugal changed you?
Oh, how has Portugal changed me? That's a really good question. Yeah, I think
you're welcome to use these questions on your YouTube channel. You know, yeah. I'll think about royalties or something. No, I'm just joking. Sure. Go ahead.
How has it changed me? Yeah, I think it's just that it's the different priorities and just also being really able to appreciate more simple things. So, you don't have to be doing something that seems to be so, highbrow and impressive all the time. You just want to stroll down to the river and have a glass of wine and just appreciate the peace. And I think that in a place like London where there's so much movement and chaos and everybody's striving, for the next thing, to buy something, to get promotion, to do this, to do that. Actually, being in Portugal is so much more about being still and appreciating just very, very natural beauty, whether it's the river or a beach or a mountain. I think as well, just learning to slow down, learning to appreciate, simpler things, having more patience, because I am a person who, wants to do everything fast and is very, very productive. So that's gone against my personality a little bit, to be like, okay, no, we're going to sit at this table here and have lunch until it's finished, and they're going to bring the bill when they're ready to bring the bill, and actually I don't have to rush off and go and do something else. If I lose 20 minutes here and there, it's okay. Just generally slowing down and appreciating things like that.
Yeah, that thing of the bill. My wife, after years of dating, because I would get up and I'd go pay the bill, and after years of dating, she said, "Why do you do that? Just wait at the table, and they'll bring the bill."
It's a cultural difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, my partner's from the US, so when we go to the US, the server thinks it's rude if they leave you waiting. They'll bring you the bill before you're even finished eating, and I'm like, what? That to me is rude, because it's like you're trying to get me out of here,
get me off the table. Yeah,
but it's just one of those things where, you know, different cultures have different perceptions about the right thing to do.
Your wine has come up a lot on your YouTube channel, and you asked me about wine in our Portuguese conversation. So this is a favorite spot in Lisbon to have a glass of wine.
Oh, favorite spot in Lisbon to have a glass of wine. There's actually a restaurant across the other side of the river. So Lisbon continues on the other side of the river. And there's two restaurants.
South side?
Yes. There's two restaurants over that side that are right on the water. And if you
Ponto Final?
Exatamente, Ponto Final. And the other one is called, I can't remember what the other one's called. And yeah, to sit there and have that spectacular view at the end of the day is really, really special. And there's one picture of me that I remember when I was first dating my partner. We went there, and just as the sun was going down, you know, golden hour, glass of wine in your hand, looking out onto the Rio Tejo, it was like, yeah, no, I think I won life. This is it. This is good.
yeah, lovely. Mine, for me, Mirador de Graça in Lisbon, top. It's changed. It's got a bit too big now. It used to be like this little caravan, and that was awesome, you know, but it's still a great spot.
I was taken there as well on a date once, and I remember thinking it was just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I actually have a print of the view of the castle from Mirador de Graça. I have that on my living room wall as well. So yeah, that's definitely high on the list for me.
There's one thing that you want people to remember from our conversation.
Portuguese isn't too hard to learn. You can do it. You just need the right tools and the right teacher. So don't be put off by thinking that it's something you can't do. There's no such thing as being not good at languages. There's no such thing as being too old to learn something new. So yeah, come to the channel and give it a try. Exactly.
So speaking of getting the right teacher, how can people find you? How can people follow you and get in touch?
Awesome. Yes, I would love people to come along and join me on YouTube. So the channel is called Talk the Streets, as we mentioned. So if you put that into search, my face should come up smiling at you. And from there are lots of free resources that I tell you about in my videos that I've produced. So I have a pronunciation guide. I have a free lesson for beginners. If people want to get started, that's 1,000% the best way to get started. So you'll find all of that if you come and find me on YouTube. I'm on Instagram too, and we recently launched TikTok, which is lots of fun.
Okay, I'll put some links in the show notes of the podcast so people can follow you. I think this will be the first time I'm putting a TikTok link in, so I'll see how that goes. Liz, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
The simple life in Portugal is all about appreciating the small things and connection with other people, connection to nature, connection to the sunshine and a good glass of wine, and I just don't think it can be beaten.
Well said. Goosebumps. Okay. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
And for now, I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Liz, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. And as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to the simple life.